Hello. Hello, Confetti. Good to be here back in the flesh after so many years. Thank you for coming to my talk today. Today, I would love to show you a bit of the behind the scenes of my independent short film, Only a Child. I will start with that. Only a Child was Oscar shortlisted and BAFTA nominated, so I feel being a passion project, I wanted to share it with you and show how it came to be. And second, I will show you a few details and a few secrets of my day-to-day work. I am a director of animated content, and I would like to show you a bit what I do on a daily basis, basically, for a living. Just a little intro about myself. My name is Simone. I am an animation director, as I said. I've been working for the past 9 years with several established companies in the UK, such as Blue Zoo, Jellyfish, Aardman, Axis, and so on, for some of the coolest clients in the entertainment industry. You can see a few examples here. Some of these relationships have been very positive, some of them less, depending on the client. It's always difficult to handle commissioned work, but I will show you a little show reel which illustrates a bit my style and my directorial approach to animation. Enjoy. Too kind, too kind. Have you all attended the workshop or the talk by the brothers McLeod before? Yeah, okay. I actually, you saw the orange blob in my show reel, Obki. That was a TV series for Sky Kids. We actually worked together with Miles. He was the scriptwriter, I was the director. So I'm just mentioning that to show how small this industry of cartoons and VFX and animation is. You know, you start to get to know people. And I didn't know Miles was coming today, and it was a nice coincidence. Anyhow, at the moment I am directing a TV series of 24 episodes for Netflix UK called Bad Dinosaurs. It's about a family of T-Rex who are not very good at tyrannosauring in general. They suck at being dinosaurs. There is a lot of bouncy, funky, farty creatures in this series. Hopefully it's going to come out at the beginning of 2024, if everything goes well. Fingers crossed. I cannot show you anything else than this image. Yeah, stay tuned. It should be on Netflix next year. I would like to, now from the present, take a step back into the past, just to illustrate you how I got to direct, how I got to create this short film, Only a Child, that I'm going to present in a second. This is baby me, a few years back. This is when I discovered that blue and yellow mixed together make green. And from that moment on, I've been designing and sketching and illustrating my own stories, writing them. And I've had this passion for storytelling, but I've never really studied it until I went to uni here in the UK. I did a normal high school. I always kept my drawing and illustrating passion as a hobby. But, you know, I always had a a passion for animation. I always, and the animated films that influenced me the most while growing up were always films which had a ecological, environmental touch to them. I don't know if you know these ones. The Once Upon a Forest and Fern Gully are pretty old, but they were amazing. I grew up with these films. And then came Spirit by DreamWorks and Princess Mononoke by Studio Ghibli. You might know these films quite well. And you know, these are these action-packed, very emotional adventure, but they have all an environmental side to it. So I grew up with that feeling, like thinking, it's amazing, you can do entertainment, you can entertain families and kids while sharing an important message, such as a social message, an environmental message, and so on. I even ended up working for Greenpeace in Switzerland growing up. I was a fundraiser, one of those annoying people in the street stopping you and say, hey, would you like to become a member of Greenpeace? I used to be, much better at taking no's as an answer. And I was a bit skinnier and hairier, as you can see. Going to uni, I also developed that side of me as a filmmaker, as an animator, as an animation director, while making research and trying to find my role model. I really wanted to look up at someone. It could be, you know, a filmmaker from the past, a contemporary filmmaker. I wanted to find that one person which I could tell myself, if I manage to do half of what this lady or this guy has done throughout his existence, I will be happy, I will die a happy man. And I found him. It's Frederick Bach. Unfortunately, he passed away 10 years ago in 2013. He used to be a Canadian writer and animation director who made a lot of short films about the environment, about the protection of endangered species. He won 2 Oscars, one in '81 with Crack and one in '87 with this film here, The Man Who Planted Trees, which I highly recommend. It's a beautiful short film. And I looked at him and I said, okay, I would like to become this guy one day. Not exactly like, not looking exactly like him, but you know, in terms of passion, in terms of motivation behind their project. And I spent a lot of time doing commercial projects. Therefore, I really needed to get out of that commissioned work and try to do something more for myself and for my own soul. And so I started developing project Only a Child, which I'm going to show in a minute. But before that, I just want to tell you how I got to make it. I spent 5 years at Blue Zoo Animation. Do you know Blue Zoo Animation? Have you heard of it? Yeah, they do a lot of TV series for families and kids, and also commercials. I was in the commercial department for 5 years, and it's lots of fun. You know, you get to animate Pikachu, you get to animate Lego Star Wars, Lego Marvel. It's a lot of action-packed, short-form content. But after 10, 20 commercials for Lego, you know, you start feeling there is no depth to this. It's fun, but there is not a real meaning. There is not a real message. I really want to do something which can touch the audience more. So I left Blue Zoo trying to become a freelancer director. And in the meantime, I started creating this project, Only a Child, which came about when I bumped into a popular YouTube video, also known as The Girl Who Silenced the World for 6 minutes. That was the speech from the young 12-year-old Sever Conley Suzuki at the United Nations in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, so over 20 years ago. No, what am I saying? 30 years ago. Gosh, 30 years ago. And her speech, I don't know, have you ever seen this speech before? Have you heard of it? It got a bit, she's like the Greta Thunberg, which got forgotten from 30 years ago. She explained, she talked in front of the politicians, in front of the delegates in Rio de Janeiro about all issues which could affect the new generation. She got clapped, she got appreciated, but very soon forgotten. So I looked, I got moved by this speech, and I got in touch with her immediately saying, hey, Severn, would you like to make an animation together? I would love to turn your speech into an animated short. She answered right away, very enthusiastic, and she said, yeah, of course, I give you my blessing. You can go ahead and make an animation if everything goes well. So the first step was achieved. I had Severn approval. The second step was finding a production studio. Now, I spent most of my career in the UK, but I'm originally from the Italian side of Switzerland, as you can tell from my accent. And I managed to access some fundings there in Switzerland. I approached a production studio called Amca Films, who believed in the idea and who helped me raise some fundings. Especially Tiziana, who unfortunately passed away 2 years ago, and Gabriella, who really believed in the project and wanted to shape it in the vision, under the vision that I suggested as a filmmaker. We managed to meet also with Severn once while she was traveling through Geneva. That was very meaningful. We showed her a unfinished animatic, so it was a work in progress, and she even with that rough animatic, she started crying as, oh, that's so beautiful. You made my speech so much better. And that meant a lot, because someone who's heard that speech given 30 years ago, hundreds and hundreds of times, and still gets moved by it, I thought, oh, this is special. Maybe we're making something quite good. And step 3 of making Only a Child was creating an array, an army of artists, each of whom with a different background, a different style, a different technique of animation. What we tried to do with Only a Child was combining as many animation techniques as possible, and that was a bit of a metaphor of different people, different tribes coming together with for achieving and for reaching a higher goal. A higher message. The tribe of the 3D animators, a bit introvert, always sitting on the computer. The tribe of the stop motion guys, like quite bulky because they have to use their hands all day long. They stand. And the 2D guys, and everyone came together. We researched a lot, these artists. We put together this group, this team, and each of them brought their own taste and their own ideas to the table. So there were a few metaphorical meaning behind Only a Child. The first one was the diversity of techniques. The other one was the music and the color palette. The music, I don't know if you'll manage to hear it while you're listening to Severn, but I really asked our music composer to base the full soundtrack onto the ticking of a clock. So I really wanted the audience to feel the urgency and the time passing, almost to say, hey, there is no time to think, you need to act now for the good of the planet. So yeah, try to listen to it. There should be it's a constant tick, like a drop falling or the ticking of a clock. And he did a wonderful job, our Flavio Gargano, the music composer. And the last thing I would like you to notice while watching Only a Child is the change in the color palette. We start with the short with tones of cold blue, and we get, progressively, we get into greens, yellow, oranges, and red. And that's, of course, to represent the global temperature change from 1850 to 2020. Probably you've seen these stripes in somewhere on the media or on newspaper or on social media. That's how the global temperature has been becoming warmer and warmer over the years. And I wanted that to be transferred into the overall color palette. I wanted everything to become warmer and more urgent towards the end of the short. So that's enough talking about Only a Child. I guess you want to watch it now, right? We are really, happy with the result. As I said, The short got very appreciated. It was screened last year at COP26 in Glasgow, the event to prevent climate change, which took place in Glasgow. It got Oscar shortlisted, BAFTA nominated, but the best satisfaction, the best thing about Only a Child was that so many teachers asked me to screen it in their classroom to make young people and students aware. That was the biggest winning, I think, from our team, is like really making sure that that old message from Severn got spread again. And that values much more of any trophy or nomination. Now, without further ado, please enjoy Only a Child.
You may be delegates of your government, business people, organizers, reporters, or politicians. But really, you're mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, aunts and uncles, and all of you are someone's child. I'm only a child, yet I know we are all part of a family, 5 billion strong. In fact, 30 million species strong. And borders and governments will never change that. I'm only a child, yet I know we are all in this together and should act as one single world towards one single goal. In my country, we make so much waste. We buy and throw away, buy and throw away, buy and throw away, and yet northern countries will not share with the needy. Even when we have more than enough, we are afraid to share. We are afraid to let go of some of our wealth. I can't stop thinking that I could be one of those children living in the favelas of Rio. I could be a child starving in Somalia, or a victim of war in the Middle East, or a beggar in India. We were shocked when we spent time with some children living on the streets. This is what one child told us. I wish I was rich. And if I were, I would give all the street children food, clothes, medicines, shelter, and love and affection. If a child on the streets who has nothing is willing to share, why are we who have everything still so greedy? I am only a child, yet I know if all the money spent on war was spent on finding treaties, ending poverty, and finding environmental answers, what a wonderful place this earth would be. At school, you teach us how to behave in the world. You teach us to not fight with others, to work things out, to respect others, to clean up our mess, not to hurt other creatures, to share, not be greedy. Then why do you go out and do the things you tell us not to do? I am afraid to go out in the sun now because of the holes in our ozone. I'm afraid to breathe the air because I don't know what chemicals are in it. And now we hear of animals and plants going extinct, every day vanishing forever. In my life, I have dreamt of seeing the great herds of wild animals, jungles and rainforests full of birds and butterflies. But now I wonder if they will even exist for my children to see. Did you have to worry of these things when you were my age? All this is happening before our eyes, and yet we act as if we have all the time we want and all the solutions. I'm only a child, and I don't have all the solutions. But I want you to realize, neither do you. You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forests that once grew where there is now a desert. If you don't know how to fix it, please stop breaking it. You are deciding what kind of a world we are growing up in. We are your own children. Parents should be able to comfort their children by saying, everything's going to be all right. It's not the end of the world. And we're doing the best we can. But I don't think you can say that to us anymore. My dad always says, you are what you do, not what you say. Well, what you do makes me cry at night. You grown-ups say you love us, but I challenge you, please, make your actions reflect your words.
Thank you. Thank you. Have you heard this speech before? Did you recognize it? Maybe it went sort of popular again when Greta Thunberg came internationally on the international scene. She got compared to Severn, but I don't know, maybe you haven't heard it. Anyway, have you seen how many animation techniques did you recognize? Have you seen so many different approaches? There was stop motion, there was paint on glass, there was sand animation, there was CGI, there was a mix of CGI and 2D, there was animation with beans. It was very, very diverse. And I'm so glad we managed to put together all these different techniques after I spent 5-6 years just working in CGI. It was a very good thing. I'm a big fan of animation in every form, even though I specialized in CG animation and in particular cartoon animation in 3D. But I love to experiment with other techniques when there is a chance. If you have any questions about Only a Child, we can we can answer, everything at the end of the talk if you like, if you have curiosities about its creation. Yeah, absolutely. So, from now, I would like to. Shall we get into questions now, or? I keep going. Okay. Maybe later. I would like to show you what I do every day for a living, directing animation. What is directing animation? I got into directing while I was at Blue Zoo. I started as a junior animator. Then I started pitching my own ideas and my short films, and I managed to get to direct a few commercials, and slowly I got more and more into the directing side of things, which is a bit less hands-on onto animation, even though I still love animating in Maya, but I get to do it less and less now. And I ended up finally managing to direct a TV series for Sky Kids last year called Obki, and now this first big project for me for Netflix UK called Bad Dinosaur. So it's still a work in progress. You never really stop learning when it comes to directing. There are so many ways you can approach a scene or a mood or a dialogue or an action sequence, and every director has got a different background, a different taste, and so on. But the main question is, what the heck does an animation director do all day long? An animation director, if you asked, the dictionary, it would say, well, a director turns scripts into visuals. But if you asked my producer, he would probably say, it turns money into dust. You're just wasting your time. To which I would answer, no, it turns money into fun. So that's all to say that there is always a bit of a difficult relationship with producer. Not always, but it can happen, when your vision needs to be constrained and needs to be shaped into a certain budget to make it affordable for the team, but without, blowing the budget, without compromising the final quality either. You want to make something fun and as good as it could be with the money and time which is available. If you came into my studio, most of the day you would see me doing this, really. So it's like, please move that pixel a bit more to the right, a bit more to the left. When it comes to CG, it's like lots of the sessions we do when it comes to reviewing is really going shot per shot, seeing the mistakes, seeing what can be improved in terms of performance, and moving stuff around like the toilet in this scene. But most importantly, a good director serves her or his team so that the team can serve her or his vision. This means that the director is usually the core of the idea, but it also needs to make sure that everyone on his team or her team feels comfortable with what they are doing, that feels empowered, that feels briefed well enough so that they know exactly what the director is expecting. So from day to day, I become from teacher to supporter to cheerleader to actor. Sometimes I shoot myself as reference for the animators. It's a very dynamic job which involves a lot of different branches. And I realized I'm not really particularly good at any of them anymore. I started becoming quite mediocre at animation and drawing, but I am what I am, and I can be a director because I know a bit of everything. I can edit, I can animate in 3D, I can draw, but not to an amazing level. And you have to accept it a bit. Once you step into directing as a professional, it's difficult to maintain a very high quality standard of a certain area. You have to hire people who are better than you at that. I always work with storyboard artists and concept artists who are better than me at painting or drawing, and that's the beauty of it. That's what makes that team in animation so special. But most importantly, or from a different perspective, the director takes care of the process of animation, which is, as you probably know already, storyboard and animatic, so planning everything on paper or on Cintiq. Layout, this is both in 2D and 3D. I will show you the 3D approach because I'm mostly specialized in that. And then animation, so make sure the performance and the acting is ready to go to lighting and rendering. I will show you just an example of the process. I'm sure you've seen videos like that on the internet before. It's like a comparison of different stages, the animatic, the video reference that we do sometimes in 3D, the layout, blocking, and the animation. This is from a short film we made at Blue Zoo in 2015.
Of Christmas right here.
Gosh, that was my first kitchen in London. Pretty messy.
Forget about the joy of giving. Forget about Christmas cheer. You will find the meaning of Christmas right here.
Layout is pretty much just about cameras and not animation performance. And
Forget
then there is
about the joy of giving.
Animation.
Forget about Christmas cheer. You will find the meaning of Christmas right here. Forget about the joy of giving. Forget about Christmas cheer. You will find the meaning of Christmas right here.
And now you've got this song stuck in your head for the rest of the day. Perfect timing, by the way, March, for this Christmas song. That you're aware of this process, right? You've all seen progression video of 3D production like that before, or is it something new to you? You should have seen it. Right. This is a very sleek, a very elegant way to show what animators or animation directors do, but that's not how directors' visions take place. That's not really how ideas come to be. This is how ideas are born. Crappy sketches on a sketchbook. I really want to emphasize that because this is what makes or creates a difference between a successful director from an unsuccessful director or an animator who is too shy to step onto directing his own ideas. Like, these were my first sketches. I can draw better than that, by the way, if you give me if you give me a bit of time. But this is how my ideas came about to make Lynx and Birds, another Blue Zoo short from 2019. And the secret, I think, there is not secret to directing, everyone has got a different background, but I think one of the most important thing is, in order to become a director, you have to endure the crap. You have to endure your unfinished, unpolished idea. If you want the very sleek and well-rendered and groomed Lynx on the right, you have to go through the creative process. And this is something I always try to tell students who, or recent graduates which ask me, so how did you step up into directing? And one of the biggest secrets, which is not a secret really, one of the biggest tools is just enduring and believing in ideas which are very rough. If you can believe in these rough ideas and being able to present it in front of a producer or your collaborators or colleagues, then you can go from, like pencil drawn elves to very beautifully rendered, slightly sweaty elves on the right. That's all it takes. Of course, it takes also a team, time, money, etc. But without that first idea, without believing in that first sketch, that first spark, you wouldn't have the films that we have today. And so never underestimating the power of thumbnailing. Thumbnailing, just like small ideas on paper that then can get refined, can get refined later on by yourself or by a colleague of yours who can draw better than you, or by a whole team, which turns the idea into proper CGI or 2D. So to the process, I would probably add thumbnailing and storyboard before storyboard and animatic. There is one condition, only if you have a lot of experience, in which you can skip points 0 and 1 and go straight into layout in 3D. This is something I wouldn't recommend, but when you have, in the industry, so especially on commercial, when the time frame is very limited and tight, sometimes we used to jump straight into 3D. And if you are, experienced enough and you know your way around Maya, Blender, 3ds Max, and so on, you can place some cameras and do the layout directly in 3D before, without doing any sketches in 2D. Here is an example for a Lego Batman commercial. There was no time to do storyboard, so I just jumped into 3D and made a blocking directly in Maya. As you can see, the final result, which is rendered at the bottom, is not very different from the top left one. It's something changed, of course. There were a few modifications, but the idea stayed throughout. So this is a good way to present work to a client, but do that only if you are very confident with your 3D software. Or if you know the character very well. This is a personal project of mine called Quack the Quokka, and I didn't do any storyboard because I just went ahead and straight ahead and tried to animate it based on some sound. So I just filmed myself and then went straight to blocking. Again, I recommend this only if it's your own character, your own creation, or you know the 3 software so well that you know exactly what you're doing and you have the right experience to do that. Otherwise, always storyboard before. Yeah. Another idea which maybe will be made one day into a series, maybe not, we'll see. Okay, so this sums up pretty much what I take care of every day, but how do I take care of that? How do I make sure that the audience enjoys the products and the content that we create? I have a few practical advices here. First of all, the director is the one in charge of making sure that the audience attention is captured while watching the film, the series, the commercial. So you have to know a few skills, a few tricks to lead the eye of the audience, a bit like a magician does during a number or a trick. So there are different ways to lead the eyes and to really capture the attention of the audience. The first one is dialogue, which is obvious. You know, the audience will always look at the character which is talking on screen. The second one is staging and framing. Third one, light and color. And fourth one, movement. Let's just ignore for a moment the dialogue one, because that's kind of obvious. You know, there is lip sync, character is talking, audience look at that. But let's focus on the other ones. I just brought a few examples from directors who are much better and more famous than me. Like Wes Anderson, he's a very good example for staging and framing. This is fantastic Mr. Fox. So staging is the presentation of an idea so that it is completely and unmistakably clear. For example, if you look at these 2 images, apart from the fact that it's symmetrical, so it's quite clear to read, but there are a lot of different vector lines that can be spotted. Can you spot them? Let's spot them together. Oh, it's red on red. You can't see anything. There are different elements of the background and foreground and midground that create vector lines, and those lines point exactly where the director wants you to look as an audience. Here there is for example, the perspective lines of the table looking at Mr. Fox. There is a frame there even created by the background. The eyes of the character point at fantastic Mr. Fox, creating some invisible vector line. So this is something very important when you stage. If you want to make your own shot or your own film, make sure that the staging, the set dressing has got these elements which point in the direction of your protagonist, or whatever you want the audience look at in that moment. Another important thing to remember is staging and framing. Now, this goes back years and years to the golden ratio and the rule of thirds. If you divide the 16:9 screen into 9, you come up with these points of focal points, which are a bit the soft spot of the screen. Is where your eyes tend to look at. That, artistically, scientifically proven. So we can believe that it's connected to the golden ratio from ancient Greek, and it's always suggested to put the point or the action of interest in these points of focus. So whether it's a smoochy kiss or the eyes of a character or whatever else the character is doing, it's worth putting it in those spots. That's used all the time by big studios such as Pixar, for example. You see the eyes or the body or the torso of the character always fall into those dots. So it's quite a good advice if you want to become a director, to keep that rule and make sure that the important action happen in those areas. Next point was light and colors. This is kind of obvious, like using color is really good for attracting attention, especially if it's a warm color against a blue light background or a cold background. This is an image from Schindler's List, which is Schindler's List, which is kind of, you know, obvious. The girl is the only one with the red coat, and therefore the audience looks at her right away. This is The Blue Umbrella, a short film from Pixar from a few years ago, and you can see that thanks to lighting, the lighting from the cars, plus the red, the very saturated red of the umbrella, you look directly at that. You don't look at this manhole there. You don't look really at these people here on the sidewalk. You look exactly where the light is pointing you to look. And that's of course, that's part of directing, a part of art directing as well. So whenever you go into that in your short film or in your major project or your productions in the future, keep an eye on that. Lighting can also generate a lot of interesting stuff with shadow and silhouette. These are not animated references, mostly, all live action, but you can see the strength and power of that shadow can create. A character, you know, whose shadow is entrapped by a square frame, that's a metaphor for how the character is feeling. It's like, oh, he's feeling claustrophobic, he's feeling stuck, he's feeling captured. Or, you know, the way the silhouette of the woman against the man are bringing them together, but also separating them, depending if there is an object or not between them. It's quite metaphorical, it's quite symbolic, but it can tell the story and support the story that you create, just using lighting and shadows. This is from Nosferatu, where you can create an eerie feeling just by looking at the shadow. You don't even need to see the vampire. Just the shadow of the vampire is enough to make you afraid. And last bit that I would love you to keep in mind for the future is movement. That's, of course, paramount to animation. Animation is movement on screen, but the way you move your character and what you move on screen determines what the audience is looking at. Exactly like I mentioned before, like a magician doing a trick, and while he's doing a flamboyant movement with his hand, he's hiding the cards behind his back or doing, you know, his trick, arranging his trick so that it works. And it's quite important to remember there are different principles of animation, between which there is anticipation. Do you know what I'm talking about, right? If I want to jump, I need to go down, I anticipate, and then I jump. This anticipation can be really used to trick the audience to look in a certain direction. A character who anticipates, a character who makes a necessary movement to attract the attention, he grasps the attention of the audience as well. So the audience will look at him. If, you know, the magician is, or Bugs Bunny, Willy Coyote, they usually do this kind of pose before they run. That's so that the audience looks at them in that moment and not at the bird. Or, like, unfortunately, this is a static image, it's not in movement, but if you have a flow, if you have a river of people all going into one direction, that creates a certain energy, certain vector lines which go from left to right. And if you have only one person going from right to left, that creates a negative energy against the flow, and you will immediately look at that, because that's the contrast, that's what breaks the flow. So all these, you know, unnecessary movement, anticipations, or cutting against the routine or the normal flow, the normal movement, those are all very important things to attract the audience attention. There are a few interesting books I would recommend, Directing for Animation, The Visual Story, and Directing the Story. If you are into, you know, doing storyboard, directing your own film, etc., etc. This is very good stuff that I would encourage you to read. Okay, and next one and final point is appealing animation. Now, animation is I've got a soft spot for animation because I started as a CG animator, so I really tried to grasp as much as possible the fundamentals and the important things of animation before I could step up into directing a team. And I would like to illustrate this, how you make an animation appealing, how you make an animation very enjoyable for the audience. There are a few tricks and a few points that need to be kept in mind each time you animate a shot or each time your team animates a shot. First one is visual rhythm, strong posing, contrast, creative breakdowns, and feel your character. Let's go one by one. 1 second. Okay, first of all, visual rhythm. That's probably the most important one of all these points. It's what makes you dance to the music of the filmmaking. It's what makes you intrigued by the soundtrack, the movement of the characters, the art direction, all coming together. There are several things that needs to keep in mind in order for visual rhythm to be intriguing and compelling. Appealing timing, breaking up the beats, use the space on screen like depth and energy and silence. Imagine each scene, imagine setting each scene of your film to a metronome, you know. The metronome is what breaks the tempo in a very even way. What you want to do is not get caught up in the metronome. Metronome is great to defining, but it's not good for compelling and appealing. You want to break out of that even pace and create a timing which is more bespoke, more specific to what you need. So whatever is like a very regular tempo, you want to break it up. I didn't know I could do that with the microphone. And that's not just with music or soundtrack. That can be simply the way the character moves its feet, the way the character talks, the way the character moves his arm. Like all this stuff, all these main movement generate energy which can break up the tempo and making it into something, an image which is more musical. You can also use the space on screen the same way an actor in theater uses a stage. So the thing I haven't done very well today, for example, I've been standing here. I could have, walked around. I could have come closer to you, and then back. This is what you want your actors, your animated characters, to do on screen. You want them to feel the stage, the screen, and also come closer and further away from camera whenever possible. That creates energy. That creates interest. And last thing is the energy versus silence. Is there any fan of Japanese anime here? Studio Ghibli? Yeah? Okay, that's good. What's so wonderful about Japanese cinema is that they respect silence a lot. In Japanese, it's called ma. Ma is that moment of silence between one beat and the other in music. And they have very flamboyant, action-packed sequences, but also moments of calm, which are most of the time forgotten by Western cinema. I'm talking about Marvel films or superhero in general, where everything is bang, 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 bang. It's very good to remember that very high and action-packed sequences need to be contrasted by silence. That's the only way to really make them bloom, really make them emphasize. So always remember to create moments of energy and followed by silence. That will create a better rhythm for your story and for your animation. I will show you an example. This is a trailer from a friend of mine, which I really love, and I think presents a very good way, a very good rhythm, even though the action is so simple. It's just a cat on a table. So you see, it's first of all, there is depth. We are closer to the fish than we zoom out. But then all the way the cat taps onto the table, pop, 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 pop. There is a rhythm, there is music to it. And that's what makes it so beautiful. I'll play it again. Appreciate this music, guys. Yeah, it's like boom, 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 boom. It's wonderful. And I think if you create that melody in beats, in accents of movement, your animated scene will be very compelling, very appealing. Now, strong posing. This is also the bread and butter of animation. If you can pose your character in a very appealing way to camera, the end result, the animation will be better, of course. So there are a few ways to really pose your character, both in 2D and 3D. I will illustrate the 3D one, but that applies to every kind of animation, motion graphic, stop motion, 2D, and so on. So just like drawing, make sure that the important poses are done perfectly before continuing. Those are the key poses, what we call the key poses in animation. Include everything in the key poses, every part of the body. So it's not just posing the head and the torso, it's like every finger, I think, needs to be posed in order to achieve the right emotion, the right mood. Work hard on these poses and keep them simple, don't overcomplicate them. Think always of the silhouette. So if you put the character just as a black silhouette against a white background, how will that look? Will that tell the story? Will it be readable for the audience? And try not to overact. Try not to put too many poses for the same scene. That's something that is counterproductive. I used to do that when I was a student. I was putting too many poses to tell a thing. For example, the character is saying, "Oh, I'm bored. I think I should go and grab a coffee." I would animate like, "Oh, I'm bored. I think I should go and grab a coffee." As like almost every thought, every word is described by an image. It's not necessary. That becomes a very nervous kind of animated style, which is, it works sometimes for Looney Tunes and high energy, like neurotic characters, but not always. So try to more create a pose, which we say work within the pose. A very good pose, and then the character can be animated within it. So you don't need so many key poses in order to tell a story. So yeah, just an example here. Which one is better, do you think? Left or right? Why? Why right? Yeah, that's a way to say it. Yeah, there is more going on in general. Most importantly, there is less symmetry. So if you see, this is the silhouette, of course. If you see everything here, pelvis, shoulders, head, everything is sort of parallel to each other. As soon as you break that parallelism, as soon as you create lines which are not parallel to each other, you create interest. And of course, like seeing the arm, seeing the hand, better pose than a robot hand like this also tells the story better. So this is an example of which, it's kind of obvious which one is the best. This one, another example. Which one is the better? Left or right? Left. Well, okay, why left? Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Right, okay. You might be right. The leg does look weird on the right one. But in terms of intention and what the character is doing, I think the right one could be more precise. I'll show you the silhouette, for example. If you look at these two, you don't really know what the character on the left is doing. It could be just losing his weight, farting silently, balancing on one leg. Differently, the guy on the right, it's quite clear that he's jumping, even though the leg is a bit weird, I agree. The rig is not great for this, but it's quite clear that there is that line of action throughout the character, and the character is jumping. Do you see what I mean? So in this case, there is still quite parallelism throughout. There are parallel lines, but the line of action which goes through the character is quite clear. It's like the character is jumping to screen left. So that's something that helps the audience understand what the character is doing. Strong posing can be used in the face as well, not just in the whole body. You can also create asymmetrical facial expression, which are definitely more organic and more appealing than very symmetrical ones. So all these, the same thing we were saying before about avoiding parallel lines can be applied to eyebrows, eyes, nose, and mouth. So the character could open up in the direction in which he's looking. I'm looking left, my face opens up in that direction. I'm looking right, it opens up in that direction. You can push this in animation to make it more appealing and more clear. Okay, another thing I wanted to explain is contrast. What makes, once you have a set of very good key poses, the way to make your animation appealing is to create contrast between one pose and the next. If you have a series of very good, very well-developed key poses, but they are all similar to each other, the animation will fall a bit flat and repetitive. What makes the animation appealing is the surprise, which is generated from one pose being so different to the next. This is very well done in films like Hotel Transylvania. I don't know if you watched it, but there is that very strong pose-to-pose approach from one scene, one pose to the other, which is very fun and engaging. Here there is an example, like from pose 2 to pose 3, like you go from concave to convex and vice versa. That creates contrast and therefore interest. Remember also squash and stretch when animating in 3D. That also create contrast and interest. Everything needs to feel organic. Give yourself somewhere to go. Think of the line of action. So if you have a character which is on one side of the screen, think ahead of where the character is going, what the character is doing next, while creating contrast. That creates a lot of interest, and it can surprise the audience. So just to summarize, contrast equals surprise equal humor, which is a big part of our job as animators. Not every animation is about humor, of course. You've seen Only a Child before. I don't think no one was laughing at the end of that. But most of our job as when working in TV industry, especially kids and family content, is about humor. So creating contrast between poses really helps with that. This is a short example that I animated years ago.
you serious?
So just that contrast between coming further away from camera, close to camera, from being convex down and laughing to straight up. That creates all this contrast, which is interesting for the audience. Creative breakdowns. Okay, we touched about key poses. Now, how you go from one key pose to the other in animation, you create a breakdown, an in-between. And that's where the magic of animation happens. It's how you transfer from one key pose to the other. Key poses, could be just comics or illustration. Every drawing is a key pose, but what makes animation real and compelling and fun to watch is that in between. It's what happens in between. So the more creative, the more original your breakdowns are, the better and more surprising your animation will be. So it is the passing position between two key poses, as said. A good breakdown has all the information, like every part of the body, every object, every tool that the character is holding is in that breakdown. It's probably the hardest part of animation, but also very important. And make sure you look at the arcs that the character creates, moving from one pose to the next. I'll give you an example. Like there are 100 ways a character could go from pose 1 to pose 2. It could walk there, it could jump there and then step down. But when doing this exercise, I decided to make him dive in a few frames. So that makes the in-between quite surprising. That creates interest, that creates a surprise. Not saying this animation is perfect, but it's something you wouldn't expect. Oh.
They are savages. Tonight we die.
So always think about how to go from one to the other and think of the curves and arcs as well. The character could have gone into a straight line, but that would have been not as engaging, not as beautiful to watch as going into an arc. That's quite important in animation. Every time you have an organic character on screen, which isn't a robot or a tool or an animated object, anytime there is an organic character, such a human or animal, like make sure the hands, the feet, the head always follows nice arcs. That's quite important to make the animation appealing. Here we are not inventing anything really in 3D. These creative breakdowns exist since the dawn of cartoons. Like you can see some example from old Simpson or Cartoon Network shows, Aladdin. Like all these creative breakdowns have been around for quite a long time. They can be smears, what we call smears, like elongating part of the body, or multiples, which is multiplying part of the bodies, like hands, eyes, heads, and so on. This is just to get a little more technical, but these creative breakdowns don't need a long time. They can be very snappy, very fast. In animation, sometimes they are just one frame or a couple of frames to get from one to the other. In CG, maybe because of the nature of CG, because how detailed and how much volume there is to CG, it would be good maybe to add a bit more ease in and ease out. So maybe 3-5 frames from one pose to the other. But it's still a very snappy, still very fast to go from one to the other. So don't be afraid to really make this movement fast if you're doing a cartoony animation. And just a couple of final tips. How much 3D have you used so far on this course? Do you use a 3D software? What software do you use? Yeah, Maya? Great. That's very good. I learned Maya as well. When using Maya, I suggest you, especially if you have heavy object in the scene, I would suggest you to hide everything you don't use, because Maya can get very slow and laggy. So if you're animating a character and is surrounded by 10 other characters, hide everything else, unreference it, just focus on the one you're animating. And if you're creating animation for a film or a series or your own short film, animate to camera. Like, make sure you have a camera. If you have the luxury to have 2 screens, you have a camera on one screen and the other viewport on the other. If you have only one screen, it's fine. You just divide it into 2 and you have the camera on one and the viewport on the other. That's really important. If you're doing a game animation, then it's different. You need the run cycle or the walk to work from every angle. But from if it's for a short film or a theatrical film, just make sure the character looks good from that one angle. You don't need to worry about making it look perfect from other angles. It's just the camera which counts. Make sure you use some free tools as well, which are very handy, such as the Twin Machine, Studio Library, the pickers, camera sequencer. Like, all this stuff is free, I think, online. Animbot, maybe you have to pay for it now, just a little amount. But they make a big difference into the workflow and how fast you can animate or rig or light. And that brings me to my last point of this talk: feel the character. This is not about technicalities. This is not about Maya or 3D. This is more about how you make a character perform, how you make a character behave like you want as an animator or a director. In order to do that, you have to feel it. You have to make sure you try it yourself. They say animators are in part actors, and actors can become animator if they know the craft. But I've known a lot of animators who are quite introvert and shy, and they wouldn't really act in front of the camera, and that's perfectly fine. You know, you don't need to. But whether you act it out in your head or alone, like closed door into your room in front of the mirror, that's fine. But one way or the other, you have to act it out if you want the character to perform. So make sure that before getting into a scene, you try it yourself. If the character is saying something as a dialogue, you try it yourself. If a character is jumping or performing, of course, if it's like, if you are not too much into gymnastics, like I am, don't do anything crazy or anything too dangerous. But when it comes to acting or dialogue or lip sync, make sure you act it out yourself before sitting and working into Maya. That makes a big difference, I think. And build a library of acting choices in your head. Like, the more experience you gather, the more you sketch, the more you animate, the more you will build a library of different acting choices. Like, oh, I know how the mouth of a character works when it smiles. I know what muscle it moves. Oh, if a character is crying or screaming, I know exactly how to pose the mouth. So the more you gather that experience, the quicker it's gonna get for you to achieve a nice key pose. So spend time studying people, both in real life and in films. Look at real inspiration from your own life. You almost want to be obsessed by people. Don't start stalking people in the park, but pay attention to your family members, your friends, when they talk, when they tell you something, like the way they involuntary movements happen on the eyebrows, on the mouth. You know, there are all these very small details that sometimes we don't realize, which make the animation so much more genuine and so much more realistic. So I would encourage any animator to really do a bit of anatomy classes to understand how muscles move and really observe great actors. It can be, actors from movies that you love. It could be other animated films where the acting is very good. But, you know, like Jack Nicholson is an example. Like, just by studying his facial expression in a movie, you can learn so much. And, how well to pose certain facial expression to make them interesting. This is a book from Joe Navarro, ex-FBI agent who was studying involuntary movements to discover who was lying and who was telling the truth. And it's quite interesting. I recommend it. It's called What Everybody's Saying, and it tells you how does he call it? Involuntary movements or compensing behaviors affect people who are under tension or under stress. Like if a character is pointing his feet in that direction, means probably he wants to go away and is feeling nervous about the situation. If a character keeps touching his eyebrows, means something else. There is all these little clues that as an investigator you can use to make your animation more interesting. This is a scene from Molière. I'm sorry, it's in French with English subtitles, but it sums up a bit what I've been saying for the last 10 minutes about feeling your character. Make sure that your creature, your human, your alien character feels unique and feels compelling.
Allez, faites-moi le cheval. Ah non, pas le cheval. Ah non, pas le cheval, pas le cheval. Que croyez-vous faire, là, monsieur? Le cheval? Le cheval? Et quel cheval, je vous prie? Prétendez-vous être tous les chevaux réunis en un seul? Ne savez-vous pas que, comme nous les hommes, chaque cheval est unique, qu'il a son caractère, sa personnalité? Vous me montrez un homme qui fait le cheval, monsieur Jourdain. Pas un cheval.
Êtes-vous un fier andalou? Aussi fougueux que farouche.
Êtes-vous un sale Français, altier et noble? Robuste percheron. C'est un métier, monsieur Jourdain. Un métier du sentir et non du paraître.
Okay. So no matter what horse you are, the important thing is to make some noise and shake your hair. No, as you can see, like, there is no stereotype for a certain character, especially if you're animating a creature or an animal. Every creature has got its own personality, its own behavior, so make sure you think about that. And as I was saying before about the FBI agent which wrote that book, Joe Navarro, that's the term I was looking for, was pacifying behaviors. So all those behaviors that you do once you are under pressure, or if you are in a very tense or difficult situation. And that's how you find out what your character is about. That's placing your character under pressure really reveals the true nature of that character. And that's something that big studios do as well. When they come up with new characters, Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks, they always try to think, what would the character do if it's stuck in an elevator? Or what would the character do if it's in a burning house? Like that, answering that question really makes you think of what the character would do in a very heavy, under pressure situation, and that makes you write the character in the right way and makes you act, you act him out the way it's true to its character. These are a couple of other books about creating characters and story arcs, which are quite interesting. I really recommend this. So that's it. Final career advice. Be nice, work hard, but knock harder. Recycle and do what you love. Let me explain you this. Be nice is because the animation industry or VFX industry is quite small, even though there are lots of people, lots of students. Yeah, you see, I met Miles today after lunch, just by accident. I didn't know he was here, and we worked together before. It's quite a small industry, so make sure that people remember you for being active, for being someone who loves the work he does, someone who has passion, and I'm sure the companies and your colleagues will call you back for other jobs. That's quite important, I think. It's probably most people give it for granted, but I met a lot of people I wish I don't have to work with anymore, and some people who are lovely, and I hope we can share more projects in the future, and that makes a big difference, because one day if I have a project, I know which person I would prefer or I would call back. Work hard, but knock harder. That's something that I usually tell to students and recent graduates. Like, of course, animation is about, or VFX is about working hard. There is no shortcut. That's absolutely true, and I think all of you know that. But also, knocking at doors is important. I know a lot of students or a lot of recent graduates who feel a bit unsure about approaching professionals or approaching companies. They don't feel their showreel is good enough. They don't feel ready, and so they let lots of time pass after graduation just to polish the showreel, implementing new shots, and so on. I think it's very positive to keep working on your art, on your 3D, on your shots, and so on. But it's also good to go out there, join, I don't know, communities, participate in festivals or conferences, connecting with professionals or people who are hiring at studio, just to ask for an advice and see, if there is a potential opportunity at their company, or if they can improve their showreel in a certain way so they could be ready next time they are hiring. So just make sure that you knock once you come out of school or uni. Recycle. Recycle is very good from an environmental point of view, but also from a project point of view. Like, there are so many ideas which I'm sure you, but I also as a student, piled up throughout university, throughout my first years at Blue Zoo, as every week I come up with a new idea, and I try to store it. I try to write it down or to sketch it and store it somewhere, because I know sooner or later could come up handy. I'll give you an example. I made that Quokka animation I showed you before, the little guy singing Merry Christmas, Jingle Bells. And that was just a project among friends that we did during COVID. And last night I had a call with a producer in New York saying, oh, we really love Quokka. I think it could become the protagonist of a new TV series. And so it's like, okay, that's kind of magical. I'm recycling something I did as a passion project into something, I'm transforming something which could become a real job. So try to recycle the ideas that you believe in. Try to make sure you readapt them when you think it's adequate, when you think the right chance come about. Because any idea, any script you do, any shot, it could come handy one day in your career. And do what you love. Last piece of advice from me is be honest with yourself at this stage of your life. Really think that when I was graduating, there was the boom about VFX, for example, which are great. And there was a tendency in London to say, oh, I need to get into big production. I need to get into Marvel or Disney films because that's where the jobs are. I need to, do VFX. And I always try to be honest with myself and try to create content which was a bit more quirky and bouncy and more humoristic. And I eventually, it took a bit longer for me after graduating. I think I was job hunting for over a year. But then I eventually found this job at Blue Zoo, and then gradually I could develop my own style with my own bounciness and humor. Don't try not to adapt too much to what you think the industry is imposing you, because there are so many different kind of animation, so many different kind of contents, like VFX for cartoons, VFX for photoreal CG. There is virtual reality. Like, make sure that you're honest with yourself and say, okay, I think I can specialize in this. I will give it a shot, and I will make sure that I look for the right opportunity. There are many companies now doing so much diverse content. So yeah, just be honest with yourself. I've seen a lot of friends of mine and ex-colleagues who got stuck in a job they really weren't passionate about, just because there were a lot of them. I don't know, like compositing, making explosions, making fire, and they got a bit frustrated. Yeah, think about that. Now is the right time, I think, while you're studying it. And that's it. Finish. I think I have been talking enough. I would love to answer your questions, if you have any, and thank you for listening to me.
Okay, so we've got a quick time for Q&A. So does anyone have any questions for Simone? Yeah?
Wow, you know the birds and the lynx cat animation? I saw that once, where they make the sweaters for the birds. Instead, it looks like it was going to eat them, but except he used his claws for knitting some warm clothing for it.
Yeah. You spoiled the ending now for everyone.
So what?
No, you're right. That's exactly the short film. Yeah. It was a Christmas
I saw it
short.
like 4 years ago or something.
Yeah, that was my last project at Blue Zoo before I left, which was like 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
What advice would you give to students who are meaning to be directors in the animation field or the entertainment industry as a whole?
So sorry, in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, like the entertainment industry, but mostly the animation part. Like what advice would you give to a student who wants to be a director, like an animation director?
That's a great question. Thank you. Would you like to be a director one day?
Yeah, I do.
You can do it. I believe in yourself.
Thank
you. There are 2 things I would recommend. The first one is try to develop your presentation skills, because even if you are not the best draftsman, or even if you are not the best animators, the way to really make a people or a producer fall in love with your idea is making a presentation which is engaging. So I had to learn that while I was at the beginning of the presentation I showed you. I used to work as a fundraiser for Greenpeace, and when you stop people on the street, you have 30 seconds to engage with them and make them sign up for a charity activity. So making sure you develop your elevator speech skill, that you can present your own idea in a very engaging and appealing way, that really helps. So not only the technical, but also the presentation, also the making sure that you gather confidence to talk in front of a small crowd or a big crowd. That really, really helps. And I had to learn that slowly but surely at some point, because if I wanted to pitch my ideas in front of the producer at Blue Zoo, I had to develop that confidence to put my ideas out there. And the second piece of advice would be make sure you become or try to polish and finesse your teamwork skills. Like animation, unless you are a author, like an independent author, and you do everything on your own in your garage, you have to work in a team to do 3D animation. You'll need 10, 15, 20 people to make a TV series. Make sure you gather and you grasp the best advices and suggestions in terms of teamwork. That's really important. Especially handling people who are precious or quite proud of their own creation. You know, every artist, every time you draw, every time you film, every time you animate, you put a piece of heart into that work. So it's easy to get touchy and get quite sensitive when you give feedback. Make sure that you can handle personalities which are different. Some personalities are easy to handle, some personalities are more tricky, and you have to be kind but just at the same time as a director, making sure that the artist knows what the mistake is or what the improvement could be, but without making him feel bad. It's really tricky. It's almost being a politician, basically. You have to learn how to communicate stuff in the most fair possible way. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we've got time for a couple more questions. So,
I have a question. Well, I have two questions. The first one is, how long have you been learning how to use different 3D software like Maya, Blender, and what's your sort of strategy to learning those things? And like, how many hours do you put into learning that a day?
Before going to university, I never touched a 3D software. Until I was 20, 21, I only drew by hand. I started using Photoshop and Maya at uni. And it took, you never stop learning really, but I think I gathered enough confidence after 3 years. It took 3 years of BA for me to be, okay, now I can animate quite fast, I'm ready for the industry. I don't know how many hours I put into that, honestly. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't know. It was, I spent so many nights on our final major project. I wouldn't know how much, but especially second and third year were very intense, very dedicated to learning Maya and Nuke. I knew already a bit of Premiere, but I think that's the key. If you are very comfortable with one software and maybe you know a few others, maybe you're less comfortable, but that gives you enough comfort and enough confidence to go and grab a job once you get out of school. You know, be very good and very specialized in one, and I have a few other as secondary roles that you could cover. You know, in my case, I was quite good at Maya in animation, but I could do also storyboard. I could do editing. You know, I knew a few other things. In terms of, I would say, it's difficult. Some people learn to animate in Maya in 1 year. It took 3 years for me because I was really bad at computers in general. So everyone is different, but yeah, I would say at least 3 years to become very confident.
So, have you ever thought about like making a YouTube channel and showing your work?
A YouTube channel?
Yeah.
I thought about that, yeah. The problem is it takes a lot of time to make tutorials. I did some tutorials for a school in London, and I realized how long it took just to put tutorials together and put presentations together. And I got dragged into so many projects that I had to choose whether I direct something full-time or I create content for YouTube. I would love to, but it really takes, it almost becomes a full-time job. So I should take a break from everything else if I wanted to do it.
Are you going to consider that one day?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. one day I'll have my YouTube channel with 3 subscribers.
I'll be one of the first.
Yeah.
Okay, got time for one more. I'll pass it down to Lewis.
Okay, so I wanted to ask a personal question because I wanted to kind of get to know you a little bit more. Out of all the projects you've worked on, which one would you say is your favourite or favourites? Do you have any like favourites?
It's difficult. I think my favorite and the one I'm most proud of is Only a Child that I showed you, but that doesn't represent me at all. Like all my other stuff is very bouncy, very humor driven. So I would say Only a Child is the most profound one and the one I'm most proud of. But that film that your friend was talking about, Lynx and Birds, that's probably the one I'm most proud of in terms of character performance and CG quality. That was quite high budget and it was very well animated, and the fur, the feathers, like everything worked quite well. I think that's the one I'm most proud of when it comes to technical achievement. Only a Child is special because of other reasons.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Have a lovely rest of your day. And thank you for listening.